Right now, on to the point. Ballots seized. Why a gubernatorial candidate wants a closer look at thousands of ballots from last year's special election.
We don't know what we're going to find until we count those ballots.
The Supreme Court weighing in on mail-in ballots and how late they can be sent to be counted. ICE at airports. President Trump's plan to help TSA workers, but will it work?
The line was out the door and it was all the way downstairs to the baggage claim.
What travelers need to know.
As always, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Alex Bell. A Southern California sheriff has seized more than 600,000 ballots in an investigation that is tied to alleged voter fraud in last November's Prop 50 election. Tonight, it's raising some serious concerns from state leaders. ABC 10's Becca Hobecker joins us in studio to explain.
Yeah, Alex, the California Secretary of State who oversees elections and the Attorney General both question the basis of this investigation. Moreover, the sheriff involved is a candidate for governor, raising political questions.
I'm Chad Bianco, Riverside County Sheriff.
On Friday, Riverside County Sheriff and Republican candidate for governor Chad Bianco announced he is investigating an allegation of miscounted ballots in his county in the November 2025 special election.
It is basically a fact-finding mission.
He's referencing numbers from the Riverside County Registrar of Voters. That's whose office administers the county's elections.
The Registrar of Voters maintained handwritten logs of the total number of ballots coming into the ROV. An audit of those logs received from the Riverside County Registrar of Voters allegedly shows 611,428 ballots were cast, but 657,322 votes were reported and certified to the Secretary of State. That is a difference of 45,896 votes.
He says the calculation comes from a group of citizen volunteers who obtained the information through a public records request.
We don't know what we're going to find until we count those ballots.
California Secretary of State Shirley Weber, whose office oversees elections statewide, says the allegations lack credible evidence and risk undermining public confidence in our elections. In several letters from late February through early March, California Attorney General Rob Bonta asked Bianco to pause his investigation, saying, "I am concerned about the potential for this investigation, which is unprecedented in scope and scale, to undermine public confidence in state elections. At the same time, I take seriously any concerns about potential election irregularities. For these reasons, it is imperative that my office have adequate time to understand the issues underlying the investigation before your office takes further steps."
What undermines the public trust in elections is the Attorney General trying to stop it from happening.
Gauri Ramachandran is Director of Elections and Security at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law. In a thread on Blue Sky, she compares Bianco's seizure of ballots to Trump doing the same in Fulton County, Atlanta earlier this year in search of voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election, saying in part, "It looks like in both cases, the investigations are being driven by claims from activists that have already been investigated or addressed. And these ballot seizures are setting a dangerous precedent."
I've never talked to the federal government or President Trump about this investigation.
The Attorney General's office tells ABC 10 Bianco seized approximately 1,000 boxes of ballots, saying, "We are especially concerned with legal deficiencies in the affidavits underlying the warrants, including the omission of material facts. This matter is ongoing, and we will take further action as necessary to ensure its appropriate resolution." Sheriff Bianco says a Riverside County judge is requiring a special master to oversee the ballot counting process. His process is working with the court to choose that person right now, and only then can the counting begin. Now, Bianco anticipates that happening soon and says they won't be counting yes and no votes, only the number of ballots received. Alex.
All right, Becca, thank you so much. Something we'll be following very closely. All right, this week, the U.S. Supreme Court is set to rule on a case that can change the future of elections. The ruling could pose a significant change to voting by mail, which voters have used for decades. Conservative justices of the Supreme Court are questioning a Mississippi law whether mail-in ballots postmarked by but received after Election Day should be counted. Now, in California, all registered voters receive mail-in ballots. Per state law, ballots received up to 7 days after Election Day are counted as long as they were postmarked by Election Day. More than a dozen other states also share this grace period.
No voter's voice should be silenced due to something outside their control, like delays in mail.
And there are a whole number of reasons why somebody might wait to submit their ballot until Election Day. They might be doing more research, or they might be working. They might be busy with their children.
Legislative analyst Chris McHaley says that the ruling would affect federal elections, so presidential and congressional seats. And McHaley says because the ruling would be from the nation's highest court, California would not be able to appeal. Now, to break all of this down, I'm bringing in political analyst Steve Swat. Steve, thank you so much. I appreciate it. A lot to get to here, so let's jump right in. First, I want to go back to Bianco seizing those ballots. Talk about the legal and political implications of, Sheriff Bianco seizing over 500,000 ballots in Riverside County.
Well, there certainly are some political implications, and I think a lot of people are looking at what he is doing through the lens of politics. After all, he's a candidate for governor. The latest polls show him within striking distance of making the two-person runoff, and so this is a big issue for him, and this is something that is giving him a great deal of attention. He's in every newspaper, in California, all over the place, and so personally, and I think a lot of Democrats believe that this is an effort to boost his name identification and his bona fides as he runs for governor.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is, could Bianco's actions really set a precedent for other local law enforcement to intervene in the election process? You think we're going to see more of that?
Well, we could, but you got to remember that the Riverside registrar already went through like a recount, basically, and found nothing. And the Secretary of State, as was in that report by Becca, indicated there was nothing to find. So if you assume that they come up with nothing or nothing substantial in terms of fraud, then that would probably be a disincentive because it would fail.
In your opinion, do you think that voters in Riverside County or elsewhere should be concerned about the security of their ballots after seeing something like this? And as Becca mentioned, in Fulton County, Georgia?
Well, I think generally we should always be concerned about the security. But in this situation, you have to remember that Sheriff Bianco is a strong supporter of President Trump. President Trump has done this, as was noted,
and
in Atlanta. And, I just think that many people in California will see this as a political play.
Back to the SCOTUS mail-in ballot case. If the Supreme Court rules on the mail-in ballots, how could that affect people who do vote by mail?
Quite a bit, because here in California, there's a 7-day grace period. You have to have voted and postmarked a mail-in ballot, by Election Day, but there are 7 days it can take to go through the process to get to the various registrars in the counties. But now we're in a situation with the U.S. Postal Service where they have changed some of their procedures. And so it is conceivable and possible in many cases for you to mail a ballot, for example, on a Monday before an election, and that ballot will not get to the registrars until Wednesday, therefore it would not be counted. So if this should go through, the U.S. Supreme Court should basically allow the changes that the Republicans want, then I think you would have a huge and expensive education campaign telling voters, make sure you vote very early.
Very, very early, yeah. I have about 30 seconds here, but I do want to talk about Trump's approval rating because we have seen multiple polls from Reuters to ABC, even Fox News, NBC, showing that President Trump's approval rating tends to sit well below 50% right now. How does that compare to what we normally see for an incumbent right now during a term? And do you expect his approval rating to rise or fall based on some of the big things that we've seen from the Iran war, DHS partial government shutdown, and things like that?
Well, first of all, it's hard to see those numbers getting too much lower. It's the last poll I saw regarding California, which came out, I think, a day or two ago, by Newsweek, showed disapproval at 69% in California. And that's extremely high. But generally, presidents have problems. And those problems show up in the polls. And that's why usually in the midterm elections, the party out of the White House tends to pick up a lot of seats.
Steve, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Sure. We'll continue to talk to you as we get through this. Thank you. All right, tonight, a Sacramento judge has ruled against a lawsuit that questions Congressman Eric Swalwell's residency in his run for governor. The lawsuit filed by conservative filmmaker Joel Gilbert said that Swalwell should be disqualified from the race because of claims that he doesn't live in California full time. Well, Gilbert's lawsuit claims that Swalwell owns a home in Washington, D.C. and has not had a permanent place to live in California for years. and says the home address Swalwell listed on his candidate intention form is an office building in Sacramento. In a tentative ruling, a judge says that there is no evidence that Swalwell has been convicted of having falsified his affidavit of registration. In response, Gilbert is filing an appeal and tells ABC 10 that a judge made a legal error and he expects to win his appeal. All right, still a lot more news to get to after the break. ICE agents deployed to help TSA, but questions still remaining about training and enforcement. The warning tonight for travelers.
And tomorrow, likely the hottest day of the week. We're back in those mid to upper 80s, but I am tracking the end of the heat in sight. Forecast after the break.
But first, in other headlines tonight, the State Assembly today unanimously voted to rename Cesar Chavez Day to Farm Workers Day. It follows allegations of rape and sexual abuse against the late labor leader. Legislators emphasized the farm workers movement was never and should have never been about one man, and that this is a redefining of the moment to celebrate the actual workers. The bill now heads to the state Senate. Teachers in the Twin Rivers Unified School District were back in the classroom today. After nearly 3 weeks on the picket lines, the teachers union and the district came to an agreement to end a strike. Their deal includes many demands surrounding pay increases and health benefits. And 2 pilots are dead and dozens are hurt after an Air Canada plane and a fire truck collided at New York's LaGuardia Airport last night. Flight radar shows the plane was landing and going more than 100 miles per hour when it hit the truck.
The nomination of Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma to be Secretary of Homeland Security is confirmed.
Yep, breaking news tonight. The U.S. Senate confirmed Mark Wayne Mullen as the new Homeland Security Secretary. President Trump nominated Mullen after firing Kristi Noem during a public backlash over the administration's immigration enforcement and mass deportation operations. Mullen is a Republican senator from Oklahoma, known for his close friendship with President Trump. He says his goal as secretary will be to get the department off the front page of the news. All right, Brendan, sorry, I have no witty banter to go into weather after a confirmation hearing, but things are hot. Let's start there. Maybe we're warm over the weekend.
Yeah, things are still warm, still in the 80s today. In fact, we broke the daily high temperature record in Sacramento, Stockton, and Modesto once again. 83 in Sacramento, 87 Stockton, 87 Modesto, 60s in the high country. So we've been in the 80s since last Sunday, all 80s last week. 80s through the weekend, 80s today, and I've got more 80s on the way. This current stretch of 80-degree heat has been 9 days long. That is the record for most 80-degree days in the month of March, but also the record for most 80-degree days in a row in the month of March in Sacramento. Again, 9 days and counting. Right now, 80 in Sacramento, 81 Stockton, 84 in Modesto, 74 in Jackson, 80 in Vacaville, 76 in Fairfield, low to mid-60s up in the high country. Tuesday morning, starting off upper 40s, low 50s. Still a slightly warm morning. We'll go with mild warning for tomorrow. The normal low is 45, so we're a lot closer to where we should be. Still running a few degrees warmer than normal in the morning, but it's a lot better than starting off near 60 degrees like what we saw at the end of last week. So improvements in the morning, improvements in the afternoon, though tomorrow will be warmer than what we had today. 87 in Sacramento, 86 Stockton, 87 Modesto, low 70s in the high country and out along the coast. There is some relief coming, though. By Thursday, we're upper 70s and low 80s in the valley. That could bring an end to this stretch of 80-degree heat. This high pressure finally moving away, and it opens up that storm door. So for the end of March, maybe March 31st, definitely by the time we get into the start of April, the weather pattern is a lot more favorable for some rain, but that is still a very long way away. The near-term forecast remains much warmer than normal, with some daily high temperature records could be broken. That remains possible as we stay in the low to middle 80s. Then again, as we get to April, things get better. Alex.
All right, Brendan, thank you. Right after the break, President Trump deployed ICE agents to airports across the country. Coming up, we're checking in with Sacramento International Airport to see how travelers are managing. And tensions with Iran hit a new twist today. President Trump claims a major concession, but Tehran says no talks have happened. Well, ICE agents are now on duty at more than a dozen airports across the country to help TSA officers. President Trump deployed the ICE agents with the goal of reducing security wait times at airports with the longest security lines in recent days. More than 11% of TSA workers called out sick over the weekend. That is the highest level since the partial government shutdown began. The TSA union says that putting untrained ICE agents at security checkpoints will not help, and there are questions about whether ICE agents will enforce immigration laws inside the airports while helping TSA.
The instructions we've given is you're there to assist TSA, but if you see illegal activity, yeah, you're going to take action. You're a federal law enforcement officer. We're not going to ignore illegal conduct in the airport.
If you are traveling, the advice, of course, is to get to the airport hours early. And at this point, do not rely on the TSA app because it's not being updated and it is not accurate. Now, travelers we talked to at Sacramento International Airport are concerned after reports of ICE agents at TSA lines in other airports across the country. Today, SMF says that there are no plans to use ICE to support TSA here locally. Again, no plans to have that happen here locally. Lines forming at the TSA checkpoint inside the Sacramento airport moved quickly as travelers arrived to take off for their flights today. The airport says that staffing call-outs have been minimal and security wait times remain consistent with what they were before the shutdown. But travelers who arrived in Sacramento from other states today say that they've already experienced the worst of it elsewhere.
I got there at 11 p.m. the night before, and thankfully I did because I got to the front of the line, but at 2:30 when TSA opens up, before then it was already, the line was out the door and it was all the way downstairs to the baggage claim. Like, it's bad.
The airport says that it will work with TSA and airline partners to ensure the airport is safe and efficient. They also say that they remain committed to providing a welcoming experience for all travelers. The war with Iran is now in its fourth week. President Trump says there are high-level talks between the two sides. Earlier today, claiming Iran made a major concession, but Iran state media, quoting the country's parliament speaker, says no talks with the U.S. have taken place. The president, though, says that negotiations with Iran will continue over the coming days, led by his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Governor Gavin Newsom speaking out tonight about the merger involving media companies Nexstar and Tegna, including us here at ABC 10. Last week, the Federal Communications Commission and Department of Justice signed off on the acquisition. The merger creates the largest operator of local television stations in the country.
Brennan Carr is a disgrace. What's going on in this country should scare the hell out of everybody. This Nexstar deal is an outrage. The fact that he provided that waiver, this is the same Brennan Carr that celebrated Nexstar for trying to censoring Jimmy Kimmel. The same Brennan Carr was out there, again, demanding better coverage of the President of the United States during a time of war. That should chill. I mean, I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. This is the kind of behavior we have seen in Hungary, kind of behavior you would see in Turkey. It's the kind of behavior that makes Putin blush.
Last week, 8 state attorneys general filed a lawsuit to try and stop the acquisition. The suit, led by California, was filed in federal court in Sacramento under antitrust law. Attorney General Rob Bonta argues that the deal is illegal and would mean higher pay TV prices, job losses, and less competition in local news. Last week, in a news release, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr said that this deal empowers stations to better serve their communities in the future, saying, quote, "For too long, the FCC stood by while newspapers closed by the dozen in communities all across the country. Those trusted sources of local news and information shuttered while the FCC dithered. If you care about local news, you should care about the future of local broadcast TV stations," end quote. Now, the deal was first announced back in August of 2025. Nexstar executives say the combined company will have more resources to support local newsrooms. Right after the break, a look ahead at what we're working on for our later shows. ICE agents sent to airports to help TSA agents. That's the story that we're working on for tonight at 11. Today, a Sacramento woman was detained by agents at the San Francisco airport. This video shows the woman crying as officers restrained her in front of her child. Congresswoman Doris Matsui says that the woman is a Sacramento mother. The Department of Homeland Security says that Angelina Lopez Jimenez was arrested Sunday because of a final order of removal from 2019. They say that she resisted officers. Airport officials say that the incident appears isolated and not part of a broader enforcement at the airport. We are looking into this, and we will have more coming up on Late News tonight at 11. As always, thank you so much for watching, for always inviting us into your home. And you already know, if you have something that you think the team and I should be looking into, you can always email us at tothepoint@abc10.com. And don't forget, if you do want to catch up on any stories that you missed or any shows like To The Point that you missed, you can always download our free streaming app over at ABC 10. It'll get you caught up on all the news of the day that you need to know. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow.